all of them have got to attend to this matter of the challenge of achieving the necessary higher rates and sustained rates of growth.
Let's talk about the issues of military coups on the continent. Africa is not new to military coups. In the 60s and the 70s, in part of the 80s, and then we're seeing, coups coming back again in the 21st century. We've seen it in Mali, we've seen it in Niger, Gabon, and so on. What is your assessment of the coups on the African continent right now? They all claim to, one way or the other, trying to solve the African problem. They're here to take away what the issues are, but what's your assessment of that?
No, I think it's a reflection. This cause that we're talking about is a reflection of the failure of the democratic system in particular African countries. I know one country, for instance, that has had some coups, but a lot of democratic elections. But in the end, you find, and then there's a coup, and currently even now there's a military government, that they say that if you look at that whole history of 30 years plus 50, you find that we have these democratic elections and all that. But in fact, power is being changed between three families. They are alternating. So in the end, the population gets fed up with that. This democratic system is not working. Let's break it. Or in some instances, certainly in West Africa, you've had instances where the younger soldiers maybe forget for a minute the fact that they are wearing uniforms. This is the youth who then come to a realization that we might even have had a succession of democratic elections. But these people that we keep electing are people who've never broken from French colonialism or neo-colonialism. All of the agreements that the former Francophone countries signed with France as they got independence, many of them remain with those agreements to do with the military, with the economy and the language and all of these things. So I'm saying younger people say that these people that we've been electing so many times, they in fact have been operating within the context of the neo-colonial framework that was established by France with effect from independence. Now, of course, now the young people are wearing uniforms. So they will then use guns to remove these politicians who they say are compromised because they are tied to French neo-colonialism, and we want to break. So I'm saying, that's why I'm saying it's a failure of the democratic systems. So in the end, you get a return, the soldiers intervene. In many cases, in many instances, you can't blame them. If you look closely at this democratic system, that democratic thing that's been going on, practically, what does it mean? Now, I'm saying you can blame them, but at least you would understand why they act in particular ways. As I say, for instance, against neo-colonialist politicians who stand for election and they have good language and they get elected, but in substance represent something that is wrong. So therefore, I think as Africans, it's part of the question that we're asking about an African Renaissance. Because when we say a renewed Africa, a reborn Africa with this Renaissance, what kind of political order do we want? What kind of political system? As you would know, I mean, in our case, in the South African case, in the ANC case, our basic document says the people shall govern. Now, when we got into power, we ask ourselves, how do you give expression to that? not the party that has won the elections shall govern, but the people shall govern. But how do you arrange the political constitutional order so that the masses of the people have a sense of participating in governing, in determining their own future? That's part of the Renaissance. When you say an African Renaissance in the politics, in governance, you've got to answer the question, what does it mean? And it can't mean it's merely that, well, you form a party and you get elected. It's got to go beyond that. Where are the people? Even when you become a government, to what extent is this government driven by the consciousness that it's elected to serve the people? Not for big people for self-enrichment. I'm saying that's part of your African Renaissance, to define your political order. But it's the absence of the failure of our democracies that encourages the return of the coup d'etat. Because the political systems in individual countries, in many countries, individual countries, fail to address the real challenges people are facing. So it's a political challenge, and so we have to look at it and resolve whatever the problem is.
But in this challenge that we're talking about, the average African is the one who suffers from the breakdown or that conflict. For instance, in Sudan, you've mentioned it several times, the challenges in Sudan, and also even in Zimbabwe, where there's a political issues with the ZANU-PF and the opposition, and so all of that. You intervened in some of those. How do we begin to give teeth to the solution issue as to how African leaders can come together to say, no, it shouldn't go beyond this level? We remember there used to be this Africa peer review mechanism, which you were part of birthing at the time. You, former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, and so many others. How do we begin to bring back that consciousness amongst African leaders in solving your own problem on the continent?
You see, that's why I was saying that I think one of our major challenges is a rebuilding of the African Renaissance movement, to re-inject into the African mind this concept of an Africa reborn. So because you've got to discuss, in what sense do you say, at what point will you say Africa has been reborn, there has been a renaissance? And what is it that will have happened which will result in your saying there's been a renaissance? The peer review mechanism exactly is part of that process, that the African leaders could sit together as peers and say we need to look at South Africa in order to assess it according to the following criteria. It's informed by that understanding of your task for a renaissance. Once that understanding goes down, then you start saying, no, but these are domestic matters. Why do you want to interfere in domestic matters? That sense of being peers with the other Africans, with a common task to develop a particular Africa, disappears. With that consciousness about the renaissance of the continent. So I really, as I was saying, I think we can avoid, in order fundamentally to avoid all of these regressions, and therefore even re-energizing processes like the peer review mechanism, get the masses of the people on the continent, their political organizations and trade unions and churches and mosques and everybody. We are united around the perspective of an African Renaissance, and must define specifically a Renaissance, as I was saying, a Renaissance in the arts, what does it mean? A Renaissance in the economy, what does it mean? In politics, etc. Without that, institutions, very, very important institutions like the peer review mechanism, will falter. It's a critical challenge on the continent, including, as I was saying, you'll have more coups, military coups. If you don't have a sentiment, a view that a reborn Africa, a renewed Africa, a renaissance Africa, it can't be characterized by military coups. What must characterize an Africa reborn is that the people are governing. And therefore they had no need to resort to arms to fight one another, and they have coups and all this. Because they are governing together, they differ, they quarrel, not physically, but in the end emerge with a solution to their problems. Then you won't have coups. But I'm saying at the base of it is a construction of a political system, a political mobilization, which focuses the minds of the Africans on the task of renaissance.
Well, let's talk about BRICS. South Africa is very critical, very central also to the issue of BRICS. What potential does the BRICS have as a new mechanism for global governance? What's your view of that?
Well, my view really is that BRICS still has to, BRICS has a task to define its tasks. You've got the BRICS Bank, that is clear. We come together as the BRICS countries and put in our money and so on, and there will be this bank which must address challenges of basically countries of the South. A large part of it is infrastructure development. That's clear. But what else has BRICS come together to do? I think that's a matter that BRICS still needs to define. Is it a common political body? In which case, around which kind of politics is it united? Is it to address matters of peace and security and stability in the world? Or just in the BRICS countries or whatever? No, I think that the BRICS has really a very, very important challenge to define itself. We exist for the following purposes. We're now in the last summit, BRICS summit in Johannesburg, when it admitted new members. What were the criteria? Why this country, this one, and not that one, and so on? There was a reasoning behind it, I have no doubt. There's rationale behind it. But I'm saying, as a citizen, I don't know. It's in that sense that I'm saying that I think BRICS needs to define itself clearly. We are BRICS, and we come together on the basis of the following, to do the following. I think that is still to come.
Thank you, Mr. President, for talking to RT. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.